So, good morning and a special hello to Professor Jacek if he's there. It's 3 a.m. in Croatia and I have been awake for a very long time. So hopefully I will stay awake during the presentation and I won't be too boring because my eyes are really getting heavy. So the work that I will present is actually something that my students have done at the University of Zagreb. So two of my master students did their master projects on sediment transport for various applications, and I will show you what they did in this presentation. So first of all, why should we be interested in sediment transport? Well, there could be some structures in rivers or in shallow waters which may have a danger of collapse if they get too much ground removed under them. So we should be worried about fluid removing ground inside those water flows. And the issue is coupling the fluid flow with the sediment transport. So these are two separate problems to model. This means we should have an accurate prediction of the flow and also realistic calculation of the shear stress values to model the bed morphology. And I will talk more about that in the next slide. So what I mean by bed morphology, so the shape of the bottom of the river, for example, is influenced by two mechanisms. The first one is called the suspended load, which means particles floating freely in the water. And these particles will be lifted up from the bed. This is called entrainment. And they will also fall down. This is called deposition. And also the bed could be deformed by shear stresses or just by rolling of the particles due to some hills being formed and the particles will roll alongside those hills. So the equations that are being used, first, the standard convection diffusion equation for calculating the concentration of the sediment. So you have your general time derivative and you have a convection term which includes the fluid velocity, so the river, and also the gravitational effects, so the sediment falling from the water to the bottom. And on the right-hand side, you have your diffusion. So the diffusivity in the diffusion is taken from the turbulence at the viscosity value. The second part, which I mentioned, is the bed load. So the first thing that we calculate is the bed load transport surface vector, which comprises two parts. The first one is the shear stress. So this is the first term that you see. And the second one is the rolling of the sand due to this elevation and inclination of the bed, which will happen due to the bed morphology changing over time. Also, another important equation, or the most important equation in the bed morphology, is the so-called Exner equation, which is being used to calculate the surface elevation denoted with eta here. Also comprises of three terms. So the first term is coming from the transport vector of the surface, and the second term is the deposition that I have already mentioned. So these are the particles falling down from the water onto the bed, and the entrainment, so particles being lifted up, get the elevation to become smaller. I will now go to the flow solver. So the flow solver is based on the ghost fluid method from Naval Hydropack. and it uses the volume of fluid method for capturing the free surface, so for multiplace flow. The pressure velocity coupling is resolved using the PIMPO loop, and we model turbulence using the general RANS models. And there is also an option to couple waves, so you can include waves on the free surface and look at the effects that the waves have on the bed. Since the bed is two-dimensional, so it is a surface, the deformation, so the elevation, is discretized over a curved surface using the finite area method, which is also it can be regarded as a 2D finite volume method. So everything which is 3D in finite volume method will become of a lower dimension in finite area. So your FP mesh will be finite area mesh, cell centers will become face centers will become edge centers, and so on. And there are separate dictionaries for defining discretization schemes and solution algorithms. Regarding the numerical procedure, first, the fluid flow equations will be resolved. So the coupling of the pressure and the velocity, also the phase volume fraction of the free surface, the turbulence model variables, then the suspended sediment transport will be calculated. So this is the part which is floating in the water. And then after that, the surface bed load transport will be resolved. So we will be looking at the surface of the bed. And after we have calculated the elevation, there will be a step where mesh motion solver is used to account for the deformation of the bed. So our mesh will be changing from time step to time step due to the fact that the bed is changing its shape. I will show you two applications that my students have done. So the first one is a study of the influence of small hydro turbines onto the morphology of the riverbed, which is quite interesting to look at since smaller hydro turbines are regarded as renewable energy sources, which are quite popular. And we have made a test case of a very small, so it is a micro hydro turbine. It is only 13 centimeters in height and 15 centimeters in diameter. So usually there are multiple turbines which will be put into the river or stream, and we have investigated whether different configurations of multiple turbines will have different effects onto the riverbed. So it is a very small mesh, relatively small mesh. The largest number of cells we had was around 1 million. We have used GGI. So the mesh around the turbine was generated separate from the far field. And we have used a generalized grid interface to connect the two meshes. And the rotation is accounted for using the multiple reference frame. So we add source terms into the momentum equation. Relatively low velocity of the stream, so 0.4 and 0.6 meters per second. And the average particle size of the sand is about 1.8 millimeters. This could be very coarse sand in a stream, or perhaps some smaller rocks. And we have studied 4 configurations. First, we have looked at the single turbine in the stream, then 2 turbines which are set one directly behind another, so coaxially. Then the same case with the 2 turbines set one behind another, but the distance between the turbines was increased. And then the fourth case, was 2 turbines set next one to another, so radially. And we were interested in first the interactions between the turbines, so whether there will be a difference in the morphology of the riverbed due to the fact that we have put the turbines in different configurations. So the pictures that we are currently looking at show the elevation of the bed So when you look at the blue colors, this means that the elevation is negative. So there is a hole in the bed. And if it is more of a red or orange color, it means there is a hill. And green should be zero elevation, so zero level. And if we have a single turbine, you can notice that there are some elevations, some hills directly behind the turbine. Also, if you take a look, there is a hole right near the pillar, and there is a huge hole in the far field. So this is due to shear stresses caused by the rotation of the turbine. So the rotation, the vortices forming behind the turbine cause the sediment, so the sediment on the bed to move onto the left-hand side of the domain. For two turbines set one directly behind another, which are relatively close, you can see that behind the first turbine, there aren't any hills, there is a hole, and behind the second turbine, there is a higher elevation that we had in the case of the first turbine. So the riverbed has changed significantly in comparison to a single turbine. Putting two turbines directly behind one another with a larger distance between them changes the picture even more. So the first turbine has almost no effect on the riverbeds, only slight effects, but the second turbine has a large effect. So you can see a very large hill forming behind the second turbine. And the last case that we tested, so two turbines next to one another, shows the smallest effect on the riverbed. So putting them in a row really shows that there is no danger in structures which could be downstream of the turbines. And there was also an experiment that we have found in the literature, which we used to compare qualitatively, since the particle size that was used in the experiment was not known. So we couldn't compare the results directly, but we could compare the trends. And looking at these two pictures with turbines being set apart, so there is a smaller and a larger distance, and comparing them to an experiment, we can see that the effects are very similar. So there are larger hills when they're closer together behind the first turbine, compared when we set them apart with a greater distance. The second case that we simulated was a design problem. So at the faculty, we have a chair. So the colleagues from that chair deal with purification of water. And the first step of water purification is a sand removal chamber, or a desander. So the mix of this water and sand, so the impure water, flows in here from the left-hand side into the first compartment of this chamber. And then it enters the second compartment, where sedimentation processes will occur. And then at the outlet, you should have water which is free of the suspended particles. So everything should be deposited in this part of the chamber. And what we have tested is different values of the velocity, so the inlet velocity, and also the average particle diameter. So we have changed the particle size from very, very fine sand to very coarse sand, and to see whether these values will have an effect on the design of the desander, so the dimensions of the desander. And the results that we have calculated, first a few nice pictures. I always like to look at the streamlines. So in the first compartment of this chamber, first you will almost, in all the cases that we're in, you will have a slightly higher free surface. And also the flow will be very untidy. So there will be a lot of vortices forming, some areas with very high velocity values. And in the second part of the chamber, the flow should be more uniform, and the velocity should be lower for the sedimentation process to be successful. The first one that we compared, the first case that we compared was different average sand particle diameters. So this is the descender if we look at from the top, so from a bird's perspective. And we are looking at the elevation. So in this case, the blue color represents the zero level. And looking from left to right, we have increased the size of the particles. So increasing size of the particles means that they become heavier and the gravitational forces become more significant. And you can see that in the elevation values, since more of the sediment has deposited in the case of the heaviest, the largest particles, which is expected. So for our colleagues, this meant that they could have a descender which is slightly shorter for such cases with large particle values, large particle diameters. The same picture in 3D. So you can see here how the bed is quite high in the case of large particles in the first part of the descender, in the first chamber. And the second thing that we tested, as I mentioned, was the inflow velocity. So we expected that large inflow velocities will affect the sedimentation process, since convection will carry the particles further away. And this is exactly what happens. So if we go from left to right, the velocity values increase, and you will see that the bed elevation is quite high if we go alongside the axial direction of the descender. So if there are high values of velocity in some flow in a stream, the descender should be quite long for the sedimentation process to be successful. Now looking at the suspended load. So besides looking at the bed morphology, so you can see here that the mesh has deformed due to the changes in the morphology of the bed. We can also look at the particles being deposited in the flow. So in case of large velocities, we can see that particles are being suspended further away in the descender, again meaning that it should have a longer dimension. To summarize, so this solver is quite useful for simulating problems which have sediment transport in some stream or river, any free surface flow. So it can be used also for shallow waters regarding tidal turbines or such devices. And we have compared it to experimental values as well. So experimental experiments qualitatively, and it has shown good agreement with experiments. And we have also concluded that the results compared to experiments are mostly influenced by the estimation of the average particle size. And this average particle size is taken actually as the median of the distribution. So we draw the distribution of particle sizes, and the median is taken into the simulations. And also our colleagues found the solver to be very useful for their design of descenders for purification of water systems. So hopefully I have shown you something which could be useful for some engineering problems that you might have. The solver is available in FoamXtend, and also we have added the MRF zone capability, so you can have also devices which have rotation included. So thanks for your attention. I hope I was short and finished in time.
Thank you very much, Tessa. Thank you all. Questions? I'm sure there must be some. All right.
Hello, can I ask you, do you ever consider the verified and verification of the sediment or the fluid velocity?
A validation of the solver?
The verified and verification.
Yes, it was.
Okay.
So there is a paper which was published with the verification and validation of the solver. I think it was published in 2018. So the authors are Škorić, Satar, and Jasak. So Professor Jasak, it should be easy to find.
Okay, I will find it. And
yeah.
do you can we use wave boundary?
Yes, yes, there is a capability of using waves.
Oh, thank you.
Any more questions? I've got a question. Tessa, with the MRF, the blades are fixed at a particular rotational position. Do you think that influences the type and magnitude of the scour you see behind those turbines?
Definitely, because this is a steady state simulation, actually. So it converges to a steady simulation. This is why we used MRF zones, and also because of the time limit that the students have. So they only have 2 months for doing their masters, and this is why I decided to use the MRF zone. So if we would take into account the rotation, so the position of the blades, I suppose, yes, there would be a difference in the morphology of the bed, of the scour.
Maybe a mixing plane or something like that could help.
Yeah, probably. I can. Another master student can test that.
Sounds like an excellent idea.
Yeah.
I think that's all the questions. Thank you very much, Tessa. I think you can go back to bed now. And thank you very much for staying
Good
so
night.
late.
Good night. Bye.
Bye-bye.